The smell of coffee drifted through the kitchen like an old friend who always showed up on time. I leaned against the counter, holding the warm mug between both hands, watching the lace curtains dance ever so slightly in the early Charleston breeze. The light outside was soft, golden, quiet, the kind of morning that felt like a clean slate. In 7 days, I'd be married, a new chapter, a fresh beginning, not just for me and Jeremy, but for my family too, or so I hoped. I told myself that morning, this will be the bridge. The wedding would be the moment things changed. The distance with my father, the tension with my sister, the silence from my mother. All of it would dissolve in the glow of a white dress and vows. They'd come, they'd show up, they'd see me, finally. I poured another cup, my fingers tracing the rim of the porcelain. I still believed love and family could live in the same house without breaking the walls. I believed that when people saw how happy you were, they'd want to be part of it. The buzz came just as I sat down, one soft vibration against the wooden table. Ordinary, familiar. But that one message, it broke something permanent. I stared at the screen without touching it. The text preview showed his name, just that, and my stomach clenched. I picked up the phone slowly, thumb hovering. There were no dots, no follow-up, just one sentence. You're on your own. I didn't breathe. Not right away. My eyes read it once, then again, then a third time. I read it so many times, the words started to lose shape. My hands trembled. The mug shook slightly on the table. The warmth of the morning dimmed, swallowed by a creeping, colorless silence. What did he mean? Was it a joke? A mistake? Did he send it to the wrong person? I stared at the screen for another minute, trying to hear his voice in that message. There was none, just a wall, just cold. But the more I looked at it, the clearer it became. He meant every word. I typed back. Only one word. Okay. That was all. Not because I agreed, not because I accepted it, because I was tired. There's a quote I once heard from Maya Angelou. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I hadn't. Not when he skipped my high school graduation, not when he forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. Not when he showed up late, left early, and always had somewhere better to be. I always gave him another chance to show up as someone else. But this wasn't silence. This was rejection wrapped in clarity. I set the phone down and stared at the refrigerator. The hum felt louder than usual, like the whole house had leaned in to listen to what wouldn't be said. Southern women are raised to smile when it hurts, to nod when insulted, to pretend nothing's wrong, especially when everything is. So I did. I nodded to no one, got up, washed the mug, dried it with the same dish towel I'd used the day before. My house was clean. My heart was not. Later that morning, I called the bridal boutique to confirm the final fitting. "Oh, it's already been picked up," the girl said on the phone. "What?" "Your sister came in yesterday. She signed for it." I stood in the middle of my living room, blinking. "My sister picked up my dress?" "Yes, ma'am. She said you asked her to." I hadn't. I hung up without another word. Texted my mom. No answer. Texted my sister. "Everything's crazy today," was all she said. I looked out the window for a long time. I could feel it, a hand reaching into my life, pulling strings I hadn't tied, cutting ones I had. "They took my dress?" I whispered out loud. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, arms limp at my sides, and thought, sometimes silence feels safer than begging to be heard. That night, I sat at the kitchen table again. My phone lit up with messages, group texts from the family, jokes, recipes, weekend plans. My name wasn't mentioned once. It wasn't new. There'd been a birthday party when I was 7. Everyone brought gifts for my brother. I stood in the corner, holding a doll I bought for myself. This felt like that, same corner, different day. But this time, I wasn't a child. I wasn't going to stand there and wait for someone to remember I existed. I started reading through old messages. I traced back moments, when my calls were ignored, when my ideas were dismissed, when silence followed every request. This wasn't sudden. It was strategic. I hadn't replied to my father's message to defend myself. I replied because silence was the only armor I had left. And just when I thought the day was finally done, my phone rang. Then it rang again, and again. By midnight, it wouldn't stop ringing. Dinner sat untouched on my plate. I'd made salmon and steamed green beans, lit a candle even, hoping the act of preparing something familiar would make the day feel normal again. It didn't. The room was too quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. It's waiting, like the air was holding its breath right along with me. My phone buzzed once, not a call, just a calendar reminder. I glanced at it, then tapped into the family group chat. Not the one I'd created years ago with bright hopes and color-coded emojis, the one they'd kept going without skipping a beat. Everything looked polished, too polished. Scrolling, I saw weekend jokes, potluck chatter, even a meme or two, but something felt off. It was as if the edges had been cleaned up with invisible scissors. No friction, no questions, no mention of the dress, no fallout from Dad's text. Just like that, I started noticing gaps. Phrases I remembered weren't there anymore. Conversations I swore had happened. Gone. When people erase their words, it's not kindness, it's cowardice. I pulled out my laptop, opened an old folder I hadn't touched since spring. Screenshots I'd taken from the chat months ago, back when I thought I'd make a wedding slideshow. Comparing them side by side made my stomach twist. Messages missing. Whole threads deleted. Not hidden. Scrubbed. And there it was, plain as day. She's delusional if she thinks Dad's walking her down the aisle. Sent by my cousin Rachel, with a laughing reaction from my sister Emily. Then another message underneath. Let's be real, it'll be a miracle if she makes it through without a breakdown. I sat back in the chair, let the words settle, let the sting crawl all the way down to my ribs. This wasn't a slip, this was sport. They didn't just talk behind my back, they built an arena and sold tickets. I screenshotted everything. Every laughing emoji, every side comment, every time someone piled on. Because in families like mine, they don't stab you. They whisper you away. I should have stopped there, closed the app, walked away. But something told me there was more. And I found it. A new group, one I wasn't in, labeled Real Family Wedding Chat. I don't know what hurt more, the name or the fact it had been created 2 months ago. Private, hidden, just the important ones, I guess. They'd planned everything in there. Coordinated outfits, speech cues, a backup plan for who'd step in if I got too emotional. They called it Plan B, Save the Ceremony. My fiancé, Jeremy, wasn't included either. Not even a whisper. They practiced a version of my wedding without me. I stared at the screen so long my eyes burned. All those moments I thought were just bad luck, just miscommunication. They weren't accidents. This wasn't neglect. It was design. I remembered my 12th birthday, the one where they gave Emily a gift, just so she wouldn't feel left out. I remembered my graduation party where they left early to beat traffic. I remembered Mom telling me once, some things just aren't meant for you to understand. No, I understood now. The silence wasn't them being too busy. It was them pretending I wasn't happening. And tonight proved it. No one called. Not one person had checked in, even after the message from Dad, after the dress, after the group chat. But I knew they knew. Because in Southern families like mine, we don't confront. We smile. We pass the roles. We pretend. Some folks would rather lose a daughter than lose face. That thought sat heavy in my chest. I stood from the table, walked to the living room, phone still in my hand. I drafted a message in the chat. Just one line. Hope you all enjoy the rehearsal. But I didn't send it. Instead, I tucked the phone into my pocket, walked to the hallway drawer, the one nobody touches, and pulled out an old photo. A little girl in a pink dress, cake on her cheeks, smiling at a camera that hadn't seen her since. What would she say now? Maybe nothing. Maybe she already knew. Maybe I've always been the outsider. I just didn't want to believe it. No tears came. Not this time. I stood there holding the photo, steady. No shaking, no fury, just clarity. If silence is their language, I'm fluent now. They thought they buried me in silence. They didn't know I kept the receipts. I arrived at the venue with a sense of calm that felt brittle, like walking on thin ice. The staff greeted me politely, but the tension in their eyes betrayed something. The floral license was off, the lilies I chose replaced by peonies and ribbons of peach that Emily favored. The seating chart had erased 5 of my closest friends' names. I paused, planner in hand, double-checking emails. Nothing in my contract authorized these changes. Silence weighed heavy across the room, pressing in. I thought, it's the quiet betrayals that scream the loudest. I stepped forward. At the desk, I asked to see the change order. The manager's face stammered. He slid over a printout. From your mother, it said in her full name, labeled Urgent Changes, Family Production. My throat clenched. They didn't just exclude me, they commandeered my wedding. I pictured Emily texting Mom. Don't worry, I'll fix it. That humble phrase had become her weapon. Now I felt nothing but numbness. They didn't just want to be part of my day, they wanted to own it. I left the site before dusk and drove to my parents' house, hoping, fool that I was, there'd be explanations. Light was already dancing through oak leaves by the time I pulled into the driveway. Inside, I overheard her voice. If she walks down the aisle without her father, it's not a wedding. It's a tantrum. That was the ultimatum. She'd told Jeremy, make me meet Dad again, or risk everything. He stayed quiet, too frightened to tell me. My heart curdled. I slipped away into the guest bathroom mirror and met my own eyes. The dress wrinkles held memories of broken promises. I took out a charm bracelet I kept tucked in my purse. The one from childhood, untouched, loyal. If this is what love looks like in my family, what does survival look like? I didn't need to wish on that bracelet anymore. I needed to choose. By dinner, I called the venue. I demanded they reverse those unauthorized changes, enforce the original contract. Then, I blocked Mom's number. Finally, I messaged the family group. No need to show up if you can't respect what I built. Silence hung more heavily afterward. Jeremy walked in and paused at the doorway. He looked at me. The sharpness in my eyes said more than I had any right to demand. He opened his mouth to speak, but this time, I spoke first. When I got home that night, I dropped my keys onto the entry table and leaned against the door. The lights were off. The house was quiet. Not peaceful, just hollow, like it was waiting for something. I didn't take off my shoes. I didn't turn on music. I just sat down at the dining table and opened my laptop, almost on autopilot. I don't know why I went back to my email archives. Maybe part of me still wanted to find proof I'd missed something, proof that this mess had a line of logic I just hadn't caught yet. Maybe I was looking for a mistake that wasn't betrayal. The screen loaded slow, and while it did, I stared blankly at the reflection of myself in the dark monitor, pale, tired, eyes too sharp to be defeated but too dry to cry. Then it popped up. A new message. Subject line. Just thought you should see this. My hands hovered. No name, no sender. The address was a burner. I hesitated. Then I clicked. The email opened to a single paragraph and a zip file of photos. The text was short. Not everyone wants to see you crash. Some of us just want the truth to be seen. Inside the folder, images from my backyard, blurry and zoomed in. Me, pacing, Jeremy sitting, hands clasped. My expression caught mid-sentence, mouth tight, eyes wide, frustrated maybe, scared, definitely. Attached beneath each photo was a caption. Not mine, not Jeremy's. Molly berating Jeremy again. Red flag behavior. Poor guy. She's unraveling. Someone had sent this anonymously to dozens of my wedding guests. When your darkest moments become someone else's ammunition, it cuts deeper than words. I sat back in my chair, frozen, and then I moved. Quickly. I saved every file, every image, every header. I opened the metadata. I didn't have to be a tech expert to see the pattern, the angles, the upload times, the screenshots. Danica, it had her fingerprints all over it. I hadn't even shut the email window when I saw another ping, this time from a Facebook tag. I opened it. A post from the Jefferson Legacy family history page, something we'd all been invited to contribute to years ago. But this post wasn't from me. Photos of our family home, old deeds, stories about land grants, names going back 4 generations, and every single photo had a caption: Danica continues the family legacy. Danica restoring the estate. Danica's vision for what our family always stood for. There wasn't a single mention of me. I scrolled through the comments. Danica was always the heart of the family. She's doing what Molly never cared to. Finally, the right daughter in the spotlight. It hit harder than anything they'd said about the wedding. They weren't just rewriting the day, they were erasing me from everything before it. I stood up, walked over to my bookshelf, pulled out the old binder where I kept scanned copies of payments I'd made on renovations. I found receipts for the plumbing, roof work. Even that time I paid off the second property tax notice when my parents said they'd handle it later. But my name? Not once listed on ownership, not once credited. I called Rachel, my college roommate. She'd worked in property law before. I asked her to compare the current online listings with the backups I'd stored on a cloud drive. Within 20 minutes, she called me back. Molly, someone's edited the digital trail. You were on it, now you're not. That moment, it wasn't heartbreak. It was robbery. I wasn't just emotionally disowned. They were scrubbing me from the ledger. I opened a new document, started compiling every receipt, every email chain, every contract, from the venue to the estate. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just typed. And when I was done, I opened the family group chat. Typed, "I see what you've done. I'm not gone yet." Sent it. Then I crafted a backup folder, printed copies, saved them to a drive, made 2 copies. They think they can erase me. I intend to reappear, stronger, undeniable, documented. I closed the laptop slowly, and as I looked around that dim room, lit only by the screen's fading glow, I knew. When the first guest opened that email, the silence at the wedding would never be the same. The next morning, the sunlight felt harsh, not warm. I sat at the kitchen table with the folder of evidence beside me, coffee cooling in the mug I forgot to sip. The call came from Aunt Jean. Her voice sounded strained. "We're going to meet at the church in an hour. Family only. It's time to clear the air before the ceremony." She called it healing. I heard trap. I made sure I had everything: the anonymous email, the deed with my name removed, the real version of the venue contract. I didn't put on makeup. I told myself I didn't walk in to beg. I walked in to clarify. The church hall was fully set, rows of folding chairs, a podium, a projection screen. I entered to a sea of faces I recognized but hadn't seen as allies in years. My mother stood first. Her voice trembled. "Please, sit down. We've been so worried about you." Danica looked fragile, even though I'd seen behind that mask. "You seem distant lately," she said to the group. "We just want our daughter back." A slideshow started: birthdays, vacations, holidays, smiling faces, laughter, children running through sprinklers. But me? I was often missing. Cropped out or absent. This wasn't reconciliation. It was an editorial meeting. I stood, unclenching my jaw. I have some memories too. I laid the papers on the table, each one a truth they tried to erase. I read the anonymous email out loud. "Molly is unstable and may need support at the ceremony." Every head turned, all ears tuned. Then I presented the deed. This version removed my name, filed the same week the online listing was changed. Silence stretched. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand forgiveness. I forced eyes toward the ones avoiding mine. "I was never the family's burden," I said, voice low but steady. "I was its blind spot." Before anyone could respond, Pastor Reed cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable. He swallowed. "I was asked to organize this meeting," he said. "Your father said you needed spiritual guidance. He wanted me to help bring you back in line before the wedding." My mother's face lost color. Aunt Jean's mouth fell open. I felt nothing but a cold clarity. "Unraveling?" I said. "I'm untying the knots you tied around me." The reaction came slowly, soft gasps, shifting chairs, eyes darting. The people who had worked so hard to control the narrative were suddenly exposed. I gathered my folder, turned toward the door. Respect doesn't come from obedience. It comes from integrity. I walked out. Outside, the air felt alive. My legs shook, but I stood straight. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. Old deeds in my inbox. You were right. They wanted a spectacle. I gave them a reckoning. And this isn't the last act. The quiet after the church meeting didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the stillness before a second storm. I sat on the edge of my bed, shoes still on, fingers pressed against my forehead. The house was silent, but my phone wasn't. It buzzed, pinged, lit up every few minutes. Missed calls from Uncle Ray, texts from cousins I hadn't heard from in months, even an anonymous message that simply said, "You went too far." I didn't respond to any of them. I went to the kitchen table and laid out every piece of paper from the meeting. I read them like scripture, not to convince myself, but to remember I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't blowing it out of proportion. I wasn't being dramatic, as Danica had so often suggested over the years. I opened my laptop, clicked open a blank document, and began typing a letter. One to my father, one to my sister. I wasn't asking for anything. I just wanted their explanation, on paper, in their words. I wanted it official. And if they didn't respond, that would be its own kind of answer. By early afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I waited, watched through the side window. No one stood there. Only an envelope, thick and manila, sat propped against the door. My name was handwritten across the front. Inside, it was a formal letter, legal letterhead, stiff language. It accused me of making false and harmful accusations that threatened the reputation and unity of our family. It warned me to retract everything publicly or face legal consequences. It wasn't signed by my father. It was signed by his lawyer. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I sat on the floor, letter in one hand, phone in the other, and took a photo of it. Not for revenge, for proof. They could have called. They could have asked me to talk. Instead, they threatened me through paperwork. When you speak your truth, I said to myself out loud, they lawyer up. Later, as I dug through my old home files, half out of instinct, half out of fear, I found something I hadn't remembered owning. A single-page document buried in a folder marked Home Repairs. It looked like a property transfer. My name typed at the top, signature at the bottom. But the signature, it wasn't mine. Not just a hunch. It was clean. Neat. Unlike my handwriting. The date on it marked 3 years ago. The file claimed I had sold my share of the family land to my parents, but I'd never signed it. Never seen it. I held it in both hands and called my mom. She answered on the second ring. "Hi, sweetheart." "I found something," I said. "A document saying I sold the property to you and Dad. It has my name on it." Pause. "That must be something old," she said. "I don't remember anything like that." "Maybe it was some form your father filed by mistake. It has my forged signature on it," I said flatly. "That's not a mistake." Silence again. Longer this time. "Are you sure you're feeling okay, Molly?" she finally asked. I hung up. Not out of spite, out of preservation. I could hear it now, clear as day. I wasn't dealing with misunderstanding. I was standing in the middle of long, calculated manipulation. I needed someone with a clear eye. I called Rachel. We met at a corner coffee shop 30 minutes later. I slid the document across the table. She opened it, pulled out her laptop, and started typing. 20 minutes later, she looked up. This was never recorded in the county database, but metadata from the scan says it was created using your father's office scanner. And the timestamp? It's from the week you were in the hospital. I sat back, stomach turning. So while I was recovering, they were erasing me. Rachel touched my hand. "This is forgery." Plain and simple. I wanted to shout, to cry, to run, but instead, I sat. I let the information settle, layer by layer. What did it mean legally? What did it mean for my future? I didn't know yet, but I knew one thing. They weren't careless. They were deliberate. I wasn't going to let it slide. I thanked Rachel, walked to my car, and drove home. On the drive, I didn't listen to music. I let the silence wrap around me like armor. At home, I gathered everything: the emails, the forged posts, the doctored deed, the timeline I'd been building since all of this started. I laid them out on the table. Then I opened my journal and started writing. Not for them. For me. I won't disappear quietly, I wrote. You built a family without me. I intend to rebuild mine. With truth. Then I opened a new file on my computer. Typed the first lines of a speech I never thought I'd give. Good evening. I'm not here to accuse. I'm here to reveal. I closed the file. Saved it. Because in 1 week, I would present the evidence, publicly, and leave no room for lies. I stood just behind the heavy double doors, palms pressed lightly against the frame. Inside, I could hear soft laughter, the rustle of dresses, small conversations rising and falling. My heart pounded. My hands tightened around the folder full of proof. Hours ago, I had listened to the voicemail, my father's voice, shaky, admitting stakes. Don't go too far, Molly. Please, don't destroy us. He never said sorry. He only warned. I closed my eyes for a moment. The napkin with the leaf, folded and creased, felt like a familiar weight in my pocket. A small echo of what I once believed in. Now it felt like a silent witness. I drew a slow breath and squared my shoulders. Today would be different. I would step into the spotlight and not shrink back. I pushed open the doors and walked in. The hush came fast. Dozens of eyes turned. A distant cousin standing among the guests rose and pointed. I've always known what she erased, he said. The room froze. Bet the tip of my breath caught. He claimed he saw Danica delete files years ago. Chandeliers' worth of evidence vanished. Murmurs spread. Some people nodded quietly. Others shifted uncomfortably. I stopped mid-aisle and let the words settle in the crowd. I never expected that moment. Someone who was supposed to stay silent had chosen to speak. He reminded them, the truth doesn't fade just because people try to hide it. Just then, the lights dimmed. The projector screen glowed. The first clip began. Audio. Voices I knew well. My father, Danica, my mother. Next, headers from emails. Screenshots of forged documents. Each slide clicked forward, showing what they erased, what they forged, what they never wanted anyone else to see. I heard my own voice. Calm. Here is what they erased. The audience went quiet. No one moved. Faces turned pale. Jaws slackened. Danica stood, eyes wide. She tried to speak, but her words faltered beneath the evidence. Her voice stuttered. Words died on her lips. My father's face tightened. My mother's eyes dropped. I stepped forward to the microphone, slow, deliberate. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I spoke. Today you saw how they manipulated documents. You heard them admit to forged transfers. You watched the emails they erased. I asked for respect. You gave me betrayal. I asked for honesty. You gave me silence. That silence held weight, a kind of justice in stillness. Someone clapped, then another. Not for drama, but for truth recognized. I stepped down from the podium, bouquet in hand, my knees light and strong. I glanced toward Evan. He stood, relief and pride mingling in his eyes. No hesitation. He didn't ask questions. He acknowledged. The ceremony resumed. But it felt different now. I knew who was with me and who was not. The people in the hall weren't just guests. They were witnesses. I felt the burden lift. Not entirely, but enough to breathe. Scars would remain. Memories sharp. But the weight of lies was gone. The doors opened again. Light streamed in. I walked through on my own terms. When they cheered, I knew I had finally turned the tide. But the final act was still ahead. The light woke me gently. Soft streaks of gold slipping through the sheer curtain, landing across my arm, my cheek. The edge of the blanket twisted around my legs. For a few seconds, I didn't move. The kind of stillness that feels earned, not forced. My eyes adjusted, and the wedding ring on my finger caught a sliver of sun. It glinted, steady, real. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt true. Yesterday had wrung me out. Every piece of me laid bare in front of people I grew up around. people who thought silence was safer than truth. Now, in the quiet of this lakeside cabin, it was just me and what was left behind. I sat up slowly, bones a little sore, soul oddly lighter. I reached for my notebook on the nightstand. Pen met paper without ceremony. I didn't write about Danica, or my father, or the applause. I wrote about the space in between, the breath I took right before opening those doors, the hum in my chest that wasn't fear anymore, just readiness. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head, clear as the lake outside. "What doesn't break you, shapes you." She said it once while slicing apples, matter of fact. Back then, I thought it was about being tough. Now, I knew it was about becoming. I pulled on a sweatshirt and walked out onto the porch barefoot. The wood was cool, rough against my feet. Down by the shore, mist hovered over the water like a hush not yet lifted. I followed the dirt path slowly, every step grounding. The silence after my words yesterday still lived in my ears. That moment when nobody clapped, nobody gasped. Just stillness. Not shock. Not denial. Just recognition. The kind that doesn't come from agreement, but from awareness. The kind that shifts something permanent. I thought about the ones who stayed silent, not because they didn't know, but because they didn't want to be the first. Fear, shame, loyalty. Maybe all three. But I also realized something I hadn't dared believe until now. I never needed their permission, or their approval. I kept waiting for a hand to reach out, to walk with me, but I was already standing. The fear that once lived in my bones, fear of rejection, of being cast out, of being labeled dramatic or ungrateful, it was just gone. Not because anyone apologized, but because I didn't need them to anymore. By the time I circled back to the cabin, the sun was higher. Evan stood at the door, holding a white envelope. "Someone left this," he said, nodding toward the doormat. My name was written across it in my father's handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I sat on the porch step, the letter in my lap. Then, without drama, I tore the seal. His handwriting had aged, a little more jagged than I remembered, still unmistakable. "Molly," it started, "I won't waste space with excuses. I know I failed you. I let things happen I shouldn't have. I watched Danica lie and twist, and I told myself you were too strong to break, that you'd figure it out, that you didn't need me." My hands gripped the edges, but I kept reading. I thought staying out of it was staying neutral. But now I see. Silence chooses a side. I didn't protect you. I didn't stand next to you when it mattered. And that's on me. It wasn't an apology in the way people expect. No begging. No tidy wrap-up. Just a man naming what he did, or didn't do. "You never needed saving," he wrote. "But I should have stood beside you anyway." I folded the letter slowly, pressing the crease down with my thumb. There was no tear, no dramatic reaction, just a small, internal shift. It wasn't forgiveness, it was closure. Later, with coffee cooling beside me, I opened my laptop and stared at the blank blog screen. I typed without hesitation. Title: "The Wedding That Freed Me." I didn't name names. I didn't point fingers. I just told the truth the way it had lived inside me. Quiet. Growing. The comments started coming in within the hour. I thought I was the only one. This gave me permission I didn't know I needed. Thank you, just thank you. None of them knew my face. And yet, they saw me. A few days later, I recorded a podcast with a therapist friend, just two voices talking about family, estrangement, boundaries, and choosing peace over performance. I didn't talk about my wedding. I talked about what came after, when the truth doesn't echo anymore, but simply exists. Evan and I planned a small trip, no big airports, just the road, some hiking trails, maybe a roadside diner or two. We sat on the porch with a map spread out between us. He traced routes with his finger while I sipped tea. My phone buzzed. A voicemail. It was my cousin, the one who hadn't spoken to me in years. "Hey," her voice cracked. "I heard what you said at the wedding." I didn't say anything then, but I should have. I was scared. But watching you, God, Molly, you gave me something I didn't know I was missing. Strength. Thank you. I set the phone down. Some ripples take a while to reach the shore, but they come. That night, as the wind picked up and pine needles tapped against the windows, I pulled out a cedar box I'd kept tucked away. Inside, the folded napkin, the flash drive, and now, the letter from my father. I added it to the pile, then took a black marker and wrote across the lid, "For my daughter someday." Because some truths are written for the world to read, others are kept for the ones we raise.